Hello, welcome everybody. This is the latest April version of the Forward Trust Chief Executive vlog. My name is Mike Trace. I'm Forward Trust Chief Executive, and this is the latest in a series of vlogs talking about policy issues that affect the Forward Trust work. Now, last month's vlog was talking about sentencing policy, very much in the news at the moment with the Gork review and James Timpson looking at changes to sentencing policy that may reduce the pressure on prison numbers. While they're off thinking about that, we wanted to move on at Forward Trust and talk about the actual management of prisons themselves. How do you manage a prison in a position of overcrowding and try to get good outcomes? And this challenge of managing prisons is a perpetual crisis. It seems that way in the media, but if you work in prisons, if you're a governor of a prison or prison staff member, you know that basically we're spending all of our time trying to keep the lid on things, trying to keep the lid on the numbers. There is always overcrowding. Almost all the prisons in the country are facing an overcrowding situation, and also trying to keep the lid on violence, self-harm, mental health problems. These are not good times to be managing prisons. The resources level is not adequate to do the job, and there is the constant pressure of new people coming in every day, more than there are cells available for them. So let's not be under any illusions. Trying to run a prison at any level of management at the moment is a tough job. And I think it's a tough job, always has been a tough job, but it's particularly tough now because I would call of three significant policy mistakes that have been made over recent years. The first of these mistakes is one I've mentioned before on these vlogs and several other places, is the decisions, if we can call it that, not particularly strategic decisions, but the decisions of governments, successive governments since the 90s, to increase the prison population without significantly increasing the resources available to run the prisons. So you'll have heard this before, but there were around 40,000 people in prison in the early 1990s, and that's reached now nearly 90,000, more than doubled over that 20, 30-year period. And the resources available to look after that group of people have not gone up in any way at the same level. Now, the second big mistake was very specific to the austerity period. So we had this problem of a growing prison population and not a growing budget. And that was massively compounded in the years of 2012 to 2019. You'll remember George Osborne and David Cameron, neither of whom had any knowledge or understanding of the prison system, but they reduced the amount of money going into the prison's budget, into the Ministry of Justice budget, and expected the managers of the prison system to still manage a safe, humane and rehabilitative system with significantly less money. Now, that was a curveball sent to the prison service by the Treasury and by the government at the time, but they played that curveball very badly. One of the first things that was done at that time was understandably saying, okay, we got to save ridiculous amounts of money. How are we going to do that? The vast majority of prison budgets is on staffing, so they have to save that money through the staffing budget. And through those years, there was a very big program of voluntary redundancy offered to existing prison officers. And of course, a lot of those prison officers took those redundancy terms and took the opportunity to leave the service early. Now, that achieved the short-term objective of reducing the overall staffing level in prisons, but what it did is lose a massive amount of experience. The majority of people who took that early retirement option were very experienced prison officers, experienced in what we call prison craft, i.e. getting relationships with prisoners, getting prison managed, and looking after the day-to-day running of prisons with very smart judgments and experienced judgments. So what you did in one fell swoop was in a few years take out layers of experience and layers of expertise from the prison staff workforce. So the reduction in prison staff numbers and the reduction in experience meant that the balance of power in most prisons in the country changed significantly during the 2010s. And it did mean, unfortunately, that the power on the wings moved very significantly towards the prisoners, away from the prison officers, just in terms of numbers, but as I say, also in terms of experience and prison craft. And that was a very baleful effect that change in power had, and particularly through the drug market. During these years of low staffing and low control, that's where the prison drug market moved from what I used to call a cottage industry, people getting bits and bobs of drugs in at different times, to a very organized business controlled by gangs, controlled by people who controlled the money on the wings. And with that came an awful lot of violence and intimidation and a lot more drugs available for use. So put all these factors together, and by the time the pandemic came along in 2020, you had prisons that were very hard to control and prison officers with very little ability on the wings to enforce the rules and observe security and compliance with the rules. Then with pandemic lockdowns, so once again, a curveball thrown to the prison service. You've got 80 odd thousand people in there. You've got a big infection risk. You've got to look after those people, but you still need to maintain discipline and control. And the main thing that the prison service did at that time was what I would maybe call the third big mistake. Obviously, isolating prisoners, keeping them away from each other to reduce infection was an important public health measure. But the way that was achieved was keeping people behind their cell doors for 23 hours a day. Very limited association, limited ability of prisoners to get out of their cells, do anything positive. Now, of course, that kept control of the infection. That's a good result. It kept control and kept violence levels down during a very difficult time for prisons as well as the rest of society. But it led to the view, and I think this is the third big mistake, it led to the view that is summarized in the phrase, happiness is door-shaped. And the phrase happiness is door-shaped represents the idea that a prison is most safely run, is most safely controlled when all the prisoners are in their cells most of the time. And that became a very tempting strategy or solution to many prison managers and prison staff to say, well, we haven't got enough staff to run a proper regime. We haven't got enough control to keep everybody safe. Let's keep everybody locked up and separated from each other for as long as possible. Now, I would say that idea of containment and warehousing of prisoners may sound good on paper, may sound good in press releases, but it was fundamentally wishful thinking. The idea that you could keep people away from each other and that would lead to a more contented population and a safer population, I think was always for the birds. The prisons we want are, yes, safe and controlled and with the staff in control. We want them to be humane, so people are treated in a way that reflects our society, but also in a way that protects their mental health. And finally, prisons, as we all agree, need to be rehabilitative. We need to do as much as we can with people in prison, give them as many opportunities to say, well, I'm going to turn things around while I'm in here and I'm not going to come back here. Now, you can only achieve those objectives, safe, humane, rehabilitative, if a significant proportion of your any given prison's population are bought into that idea, that they want to protect the environment as a safe environment, they want to live in a safe community, and they want to do something to work towards rehabilitation and recovery. So I think we can agree that prisons have been a pretty tough place to manage for many years and are particularly tough now with the staffing problems and the control problems. And it's not easy without massively increasing staffing for the existing prison managers to turn this around. But Forward Trust have always had a view of how prison wings particularly can be made into much easier to manage environments and also more rehabilitative environments. I've talked about making prisons safe, rehabilitative and humane, and we have experience of actually doing this on a small scale many years ago, and we think this is a model that should be followed by the modern prison service today. Many of you will know that back in the 90s and 2000s, Forward Trust, it was called WRAPT at the time, managed several intensive drug and alcohol programs in prisons. At our peak, we ran 14 of these, and these programs were run on dedicated wings where people signed up to come onto the wing to address their drug and alcohol problems and try to aim for recovery. Now, the bit I want to focus on here is not so much the program, but the nature of the wing. Where we had this working successfully, we'd create a wing or a landing on the prison and say to the prison population, if you've got a drug problem and you're serious about doing something about it, then get transferred onto this wing and you will be in a place that gives you a chance of recovery rather than continuing in the chaos of the drug market. And many people signed up for that. Many people who you may not think would be keen on recovery and staying away from drugs, but they signed up for that. And we created those locations to be attractive to prisoners who wanted to get out of the chaos and the intimidation and the violence. And those wings were, yes, they were nicer places to be on than the rest of the prison. So there's a clear incentive there. But the main incentive was to be in a positive environment where prisoners were supporting each other rather than victimizing each other. And it became around the grapevine of the prison quite a powerful thing, an incentive to say, well, we want to get on that wing. The price of getting on that wing is we've got to sign up to do a program around our drug and alcohol use, but also to sign up to being drug tested to ensure you're staying abstinent, but also a compact of being a good neighbour and a good citizen around the prison. Now, we had a really positive experience of running those wings. They were never a nationwide policy. They were all local initiatives, but we got quite a few of those off the ground and had really positive results. First in terms of reoffending, but also in terms of how easy it was to manage these wings. Now, from that learning, and unfortunately we don't run 14 of those anymore. Those type of services were defunded largely in the 2010s. But the idea, I think, is still really relevant to the challenges the prison service faces now. So instead of small scale, the odd landing or the odd wing in the occasional prison, this idea of creating positive locations where the prisoners themselves have signed up to a compact to stay away from drugs or behave better or get on a education program. This concept, I think, is the strongest tool in the box for prison governors and the prison system to say we can change the reality of what's happening out on the landings and on the wings. So the concept has general application. It's not just about drug and alcohol treatment. You could have recovery wings around employment and education, recovery wings around people doing mental health and well-being work, therapeutic communities, all sorts of reasons. You could have wings where people are doing particular work around their family responsibilities. Doesn't really matter what the label is on the wing. It just has to create the idea that this is a wing where positive work is going on, and prisoners who want to do positive work and get the benefits of that, they are congregating and creating a positive community rather than, as I say, what we see on most wings is negativity and intimidation. Now, we learned back in the 90s and 2000s that there's several what we call essential ingredients of a wing being successful. The first one is create an attractive location. It's got to be a place where prisoners positively want to be. Have good control over arrivals and departures. Don't just let anybody on. If you want to come on this wing, you've got to sign up to the compact, the behaviour expectations. And if you are breaking those rules and you're undermining the positive community, then you're off pretty quick. So there's got to be a stick and a carrot there to say to the prisoners, this is not something that can be sabotaged or subverted. It's only people coming on this wing who are serious about behaving positively. And yes, you do need incentives. You need be shameless about those incentives. If prisoners are coming onto these wings and doing good work, attending programs, complying with the compact they've signed, yes, they should have more association, more facilities, more comfort. That's how the incentive system has always been designed to work. And I think it already governors have the power to use those incentives to encourage good behaviour, but I think that could be given rocket fuel if that was associated with this sort of residential policy. You get on the positive wings if you meet your incentives targets. Also important as an essential ingredient of these wings is the staffing. the officer staffing, the uniformed staff who are working on that wing, have to be involved and bought in to the culture of the wing. So yeah, it does need volunteer officers to say, okay, I know what they're trying to do on these locations and I want to be part of it. I want to be a positive part of it. Yes, doing my day job as a prison officer, but also contributing to the culture of self-improvement for the prisoners and respect and humanity to the prisoners. But also you need staff to come in and work on these wings from outside who are running the programs. Yeah, whatever the program may be, education, employment, families, substance misuse, mental health. You need good professionals to come on and set the program, run the program, and defend the culture. And that always worked perfectly with RAPT in the old days where we used to have a mixed team running these wings. Some of them would be RAPT staff and some of them would be prison staff, but they're all working together towards the same goals. And where this model works well, the results are great. The results are great in terms of making the prison easier to manage or the location easier to manage. In all of the specialist wings we were involved in over the years, you had less violence, less intimidation, less management problems, because to a large extent the prisoners manage the community themselves. They have a vested interest, particularly the more senior residents, the residents who had made more progress in their programs. They would be the people who would be setting the culture and encouraging people and persuading people to stay in line and stay in the course of the program. That's a very important part of this. You can't ever have enough staffing to cover all of the disputes and the rubbing points and the tensions within a wing. You need the prisoners to be on your side. And one of the great things about the wings we were involved in some years ago is that the prisoners were so bought into this idea that we're the ones who need to protect the culture of this wing. And the outcomes were great as well. We conducted research back in 2010, 12, 14, peer-reviewed research that said from these drug programs on these dedicated wings, you had much lower reoffending rate of those people who went through those wings, through those pathways than the control group. So you get a reoffending reduction, which is what we're all after, but you also get easier to manage wings. So I think, and as I say, I've been around this a long time, that if in the situation that the prison service are in now, overcrowded, understaffed, a lot of poverty of culture, one of the best weapons that are available to the ministers, to the managers of the prison system, is to really go large on creating these dedicated wings, these specialist wings, these incentivized wings that basically say to prisoners, basically, if you want to be around other people who are more supportive, you want to be making commitments to your own behavior standards, you get all the goodies that come with one of these wings. If you want to mess it around, you want to be part of the drug market, you want to be dealing, you want to be gang running, then there are other wings which are much less pleasant to be on. But you can create a real incentive structure around your residential allocations that accentuates and supports the prisoners who are willing to behave. Now, there are positive signs that the current crop of ministers and MOJ leaders are interested in this model. They've been looking at this type of model in other countries, and I am one definitely that says this is an opportunity in a way because they have no choice, but this is a great opportunity to do something that is fundamentally changes the nature of prison wings. This is a matter now, I think, of management bravery. We can either try these initiatives in a small way around small landings in a few prisons, or the MOJ, HMPPS can really go large on designing a prison residential strategy that really works hard on these incentives and these programs. We know it works when you get it right, and we call on the ministers to really step forward and take brave action and really go for it this time. Thank you for your attention. See you at next month's vlog.